This is the STS 87 mission, which launched on November 19th. This is myself, Kevin Kregel, the commander. I'm holding up a cap for my son's soccer team. We're suiting up, getting ready to launch. Pilot Steve Lindsey, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, on his first mission. Dr. Kalpana Chawla, also a rookie mission specialist, on her first mission. My classmate, Navy Captain Winston Scott, on his second mission, getting ready to go. We've got Japanese mission specialist Takao Doi on his first mission, and we have Colonel Leonid from the Ukraine. Leonid is also on his first mission. We're walking down the same ramp as folks have been using since the beginning of the program on a beautiful morning, getting ready to launch at the Kennedy Space Center. We'll go ahead and get strapped in, and that's myself. We're in the vertical. We normally strap in with the commander going first. It's about 2.5 hours before the launch. The folks in the white suits are also fellow astronauts that are helping us get strapped in and are the last people to check us out, make sure that all our flight data file and all our equipment is in the proper procedure. There's Winston, who's our mission specialist 2, strapping in as the last person.
Here we've moved ahead just a couple of hours, and we're just a few minutes before launch now. During the last few seconds, the computers take over, and if everything goes along okay, we're along for the ride. That swing back and forth is what we call the twang. There we're released from the pad, and we are airborne. Passing the top of the tower, we're already going faster than 100 miles per hour. We're rolling to a heads-down position and the steering to on course. And here you can see big smiles on our faces because we're all so happy that we're airborne. The ride from Earth to orbit is only about 8.5 minutes. After the first 2 minutes, the solid rocket boosters are done and they are expended. They are parachuted down into the water where our retrieval ships will pick them up and will refurbish them and reuse them again. So here you see the solids coming off, and we continue into space on the Space Shuttle main engines. And what you're going to see now is main engine cutoff, at least the results of it, where we're thrown forward in the seats. The external tank is ejected from the orbital, and that's the residual fuel being vented from the tank as it tumbles back into the atmosphere and into the ocean. Once we're in orbit, the first thing we've got to do is get the payload bay doors open, because that allows us to provide cooling to the orbiter and to the electronic systems. This is not real time. We don't do things quite that rapidly, but if we watch them in real time, we spend all day watching the doors open. And here you see a survey of the payload bay with all of the experiments and the cargo that we have inside of the bay.
We did a lot of experiments. We've turned it into a rocket ship, into a laboratory. This is a dendritic experiment. Also, we've got the solar can. It's a SOLSI looking at the ozone layer, and it's opening up, and it'll look at the vertical distribution of the ozone as opposed to other satellites that look down at the horizontal or top-down view. The experiment was the United States Microgravity Lab, and it was the fourth flight of this. Another big important payload was the Spartan satellite, and KC is checking out the Canadian robotic arm. Our intention was to deploy this satellite on the third day and let it go for about 2 days, and it was going to collect data on the solar wind and solar flares, and then we'd come back and retrieve it. So here we are unberthing the Spartan satellite, doing our last-minute checkouts, and then we'll go ahead and release it. We're waiting for it to do a pirouette maneuver, and then we'll back away and let it fulfill its 2-day mission. Unfortunately, everything doesn't always go as planned, and as we were waiting there for the satellite to do its pirouette, nothing happened. So we go ahead and attempt to grapple the satellite and rebirth it and try to see what's wrong with it. You'll see upcoming that in the attempt to rebirth it, the satellite got tipped and had a rotation rate. We were unsuccessful in capturing the satellite. So now we had a 3,000-pound satellite that we were trying to chase, and we chased it for about an hour trying to match the rates and try to retrieve it. Unfortunately, we reached our bingo fuel or minimum fuel and was told by Mission Control that we had to back away from the satellite. And at that time, we really thought that a major part of our mission had been unsuccessful. But the folks down at the ground came up with a great plan to retrieve the satellite manually. And here you can see I've got my little satellite simulator thinking of how we're going to capture this thing if we come up to it and it's still rotating.
And here you see Takao Doi and myself, Winston Scott, inside of the airlock. We're checking out our suits, getting ready for the first EVA. Now we've jumped ahead several hours, obviously, because Takao and I are perched on foot restraints inside of the payload bay. Kevin and Steve have piloted the orbiter up to within arm's reach of the satellite. And what we're doing is just observing it now. We're watching for its motion, for its speed, for its direction, for the modes, getting ready to make the capture. Now, I have to remind everybody here that because everything looks so slowly, it doesn't mean that it is. We're still moving around the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour with a 3,000-pound satellite above our heads. The next scene you're going to see is where we actually reach up and grab the satellite, and there we are, and you can see that we're rotating it forward so that we can get it to the proper orientation that will allow us to berth the satellite into the payload bay. And there we are. We're moving the satellite down into the locking guides so that we can lock it down and bring it back home again. Now, once we berthed the satellite, that was not the end of our EVA. As a matter of fact, we continue with the nominal timeline. Here you see me with the red stripes, and you see Takao on the left with a pure white suit. That's how you tell the two EVA crewmen apart. This device that we're removing from the sidewall carrier is a mock-up of a space station battery. Now, this thing weighs about 550 pounds on Earth, but in space, of course, it's weightless, but you still have 550 pounds worth of mass. Here I'm going to dock this battery to the crane, and now you see Takao testing this space station crane. Now, this crane is to be used on orbit to move large masses around the International Space Station. On Earth, it will not hold its own weight, but in space, it will move hundreds of pounds of mass. It has a manual mode, and you saw Takao using the hand crank just a minute ago. Now he's using a power tool to extend the boom on the crane. The tests during this first spacewalk were marginally satisfactory. I had trouble docking this large battery to the crane, and for that reason, we're going to do a second spacewalk later on where we'll look at other docking techniques. Now, here I'm removing the mass from the crane as Takao pitches it down. We're going to redeposit the mass into its sidewall carrier, and we'll move on with some other experiments. Takao Doi was the first Japanese astronaut to walk in space, and here he's issuing a greeting to all of his people back home. And at the end of 7 hours and 43 minutes, you see me entering the airlock at the end of the EVA. We're going to close the airlock up, repressurize, and go back to our internal activities.
We also had a joint payload called Q with the Ukrainians and the American scientists. And it was looking at about 10 different experiments on plant growth. This plant that Leonid is getting ready to pollinate is a Brassica rapa. It's kind of the mustard seed family. We're looking at how the effects of microgravity and radiation have on plants and their pollinations, because when we go to space for longer lengths of time, we're probably going to have to grow our own plants and food. And here's Leonid showing a full-grown Brassica rapa. They grow very well in space. Leonid was a great farmer, and he kept busy as a bee. We also talked to students because they were doing very similar experiments while we were in orbit, both in the Ukraine and in the United States. Behind Leonid, you can see the Ukrainian flag, and he was the first Ukrainian to fly on the space shuttle. Every day, we also worked with a mid-deck glove box. And you can see Casey and Steve. We had 3 different experiments. One was the enclosed laminar flame. The other one was the particle engulfment of pushing by solids and liquids. And another was the wetting characteristics of immiscibles. And these are different experiments that we can use in a glove box so it's not contaminating the middeck. The flame experiments will help us understand jet engines a little bit better. The particle experiments helps us understand how we can get pure type of materials in space. And the immiscibles is a liquid experiment, seeing how 2 different liquids interface, sort of like if you take oil and vinegar and shook them up, and you'd see how the different materials would solidify or go out into different type of solution. And there's Casey and myself working on the Glovebach experiment.
Here we're preparing for the second spacewalk, and you can see KC helping Takao to don his spacesuit. Takao's on the right side, and I'm on the left side there, and we've got everything on but the helmets now. You can see his communications carry with the microphones down by the mouth. Here you'll see me take a sip out of my drink bag in just a second. If you're going to be outdoors, so to speak, for 6 or 8 hours, you've got to have drinking water, and we carry drink bags inside of our suit. Casey is our internal coordinator, or our IVA, and she's checking the checklist to be sure that we don't miss something before we depressurize that airlock and go outside. Before we started the EVA, we lifted the Spartan satellite out of the bay again, not to release it, but to check out the VGS, or the Video Guidance System. These are laser reflectors, and this system is going to be part of an automatic docking system that can be used on the shuttle or other spacecraft to rendezvous and dock with the space station. Now we're into the spacewalk again. You can see Takao on top, and I'm on the bottom, and we're setting the crane up this second time around. And as I mentioned earlier, this time we're going to test docking small masses to the crane grid. Now this small mass here, this spool looking thing, is just that. It's a cable caddy, or a circular device with cable wound around it. It will be the way that we'll transport electrical cables, data cables, fluid line cables, and so on into space. And you can see I'm had just a little bit of trouble docking that small ORU to the crane. But once I got the technique down, we had several successful dockings and an overall successful test of the crane. Takao is, again, moving the crane, this time with the small mass. He's concerned about the dynamics of the crane, how smoothly it operates, how much it oscillates, and so on. A lot of things to be concerned with a crane like that on orbit. Here, I'm launching a device called the AirCam Sprint, and the Sprint is the basketball-looking flying object you see there on the screen. It's actually a robotically controlled camera system that is flown by a pilot, Steve Lindsey, from inside of the space shuttle. These are pictures that are taken from the taken by the Sprint, and they're beamed back to Earth and back inside of the shuttle. The idea for this device is that if you have a need to survey the outside of your space station or spaceship, you can use this robotically controlled camera to do just that prior to sending people outside. Here again, pictures from the Sprint. Now here's a picture of me, Winston, taken through the eyes of the robot. Steve is flying the camera back into my arms. The control was so precise that I could give him calls such as, "You're 6 inches away," okay, "You're 5 inches," "You're 4 inches," and he was able to guide it directly back into my hands with much precision. Again, I'm standing poised, ready to capture the camera. I'll power it down, and we'll take it back into the airlock, and we'll be done with that experiment. This is the first time that an experiment like that has been flown in space.
Well, we did have to relax a little, and of course we had to eat. You can see I'm laying on the ceiling, or really just gotten myself positioned. Things can get quite crowded, but you can use all different volumes. I'm doing just a little science experiment with pliers to see how it rotates one way, and if I open up the pliers a little bit more, it actually has 2 levels of rotation. We did exercise every day, and here's Steve Lindsey proving that pilots can do exercise and chew gum at the same time. And he's doing the American front roll, and we've got Leonid countering it with the Ukrainian backflip. And we had some tight spaces, but we also try to enjoy ourselves when we're given the time. Nose KC, we spin her up, and using the principle's moment of inertia, she actually slows down when she opens her arms up, just like a skater would on ice. We all slept in different places. This is myself sleeping on the flight deck in our sleeping bag. We had 4 of the folks in sleep stations on the middeck, and Leonid also slept on the middeck on the wall.
A large percentage of our time on orbit is taken up by taking pictures. We take still pictures, moving pictures, you name it, we do it. Here's a video of the Himalayas, And the thing that's so cool about taking pictures from space is that you can see the browns of the deserts, of the dirt. You can see the black tops of the mountains. You can also see the snow and the clouds. And here, the deep blue of the ocean. Now, what you see at the lower right-hand side of the screen is the northwest corner of the African continent. We're actually coming over the Sahara Desert. And you can see just how rich and beautiful those colors really are. It's incredible to watch entire continents go by beneath you in just a matter of minutes. These are jet firings as we get ready to come home. We're getting ready to do our deorbit burn now, and the jets firing through the window. As we intersect the atmosphere, the outside of the vehicle begins to heat up, and that's what that glow was.
When we go subsonic, we make 2 booms over the Kennedy Space Center, and we're showing our contrails. The commander takes control of it. You're looking through our heads-up display. This is what both myself and Steve Lindsey are seeing. We've got airspeed on the left, altitude on the right, and the little diamond is where I'm trying to keep centered up. We'll roll out and see the Kennedy Space Center. We'll be about 6 miles away, 12,000 feet up, and we're pointed down about 20 degrees nose low. Pretty steep approach, and of course we're a glider. We're doing about 300 miles per hour, just sinking like a rock. And there's no go-around capability. We want to make sure we get it right the first time. At 2,000 feet, I'll bring the nose up gently to land in more of an attitude like an airliner. And Steve will go ahead at 300 feet. I'll put the gear down, get ready for the final touchdown. Our aim is to land on those black marks about 2,500 feet down the runway at about 200 miles per hour. We managed to put it down right where we wanted. It was a fairly good touchdown, and it was nice to get back home after spending 16 days in space. Once I have touched down, I'll go ahead and have Steve put out the parachute, and that aids us in our braking capability so we don't have to heat up the brakes. And then I'll lower the nose, and we'll proceed to slow down. At 60 knots, Steve will go ahead and jettison the parachute, and that's so the drag chute doesn't drape over the engine bells and cause any type of damage. But it's really kind of a mixed feeling. After coming back in space, you're ready to get home and see your family and take a shower and eat some real food, but you also miss the incredible experience it is to work as a crew in space. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to do all the post-flight landing checks and to get us out of the vehicle. But we go ahead and walk around, and Columbia really was a fine machine. There you see myself on the left doing some of our post-landing checks, and it worked just perfectly for us. There's Steve on the right, and real shortly you'll see the whole crew standing in front of our vehicle after our 16-day mission. And that was STS 87 in November, December 1997. Thanks for listening. That all our flight data file and all our equipment is in the proper procedure. There's Winston, who's our mission specialist 2, strapping in as the last person.
Here we've moved ahead just a couple of hours, and we're just a few minutes before launch now. During the last few seconds, the computers take over, and if everything goes along okay, we're along for the ride. That swing back and forth is what we call the twang. There we
mission specialist on our first mission. My classmate, Navy Captain Winston Scott, on his second mission, getting ready to go. We've got Japanese mission specialist Takao Doi on his first mission, and we have Colonel Leonid Katanyuk from the Ukraine. Leonid is also on his first mission. We're walking down the same ramp as folks have
released from the pad, and we are airborne. Passing the top of the tower, we're already going faster than 100 miles per hour. We're rolling to a heads-down position and the steering to on course. And here you can see big smiles on our faces because we're all so happy that we're airborne. The ride from Earth to orbit is only about 8.5 minutes. After the first 2 minutes, the solid rocket.
This is the STS 87 mission, which launched on November 19th. This is myself, Kevin Kregel, the commander. I'm holding up a cap for my son's soccer team. We're suiting up, getting ready to launch. Pilot Steve Lindsey, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, on his first mission. Dr. Kalpana Chawla, also a rookie, been using since the beginning of the program, on a beautiful morning getting ready to launch at the Kennedy Space Center. We go ahead and get strapped in, and that's myself. We're in the vertical. We normally strap in with the commander going first. It's about 2.5 hours before the launch. The folks in the white suits are also fellow astronauts that are helping us get strapped in, and are the last people to check us out, make sure